My name is Claire, I'm 34 years old and I live in the suburbs of Colorado. I spent over a decade working in public health to buy my first home entirely on my own. But on what should have been the warmest night, Thanksgiving dinner with my parents and sister in my new house, they stood up, told me to leave the keys on the table, take my suitcase and go. They said, "This house should belong to the family, not just you." I was forced out of the very house I'd built with my own sweat, by the people who once called themselves my blood. But that was just the beginning. They didn't just want the walls, I think they wanted to erase me from my own life. Have you ever been betrayed by someone in your own family? If you have, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to follow the rest, because what happened next went far beyond anything I could have imagined. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, radio silent. The air was colder than usual, condensation clinging to the windshield. I was still wearing the dress I'd picked for what I thought would be a fresh chapter of my life. My first dinner. My first house. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me. Not the stubborn girl they used to scold, but a woman who had built something on her own. Instead, they handed me a suitcase that had clearly been packed in advance. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't call anyone. I drove around aimlessly for a while before pulling into the parking lot of a closed pharmacy. I tilted the seat back, pulled my coat over my knees and fell asleep under the dim glare of the streetlight. My phone buzzed around 6 a.m. I wasn't used to calls at that hour, and my heart clenched when I saw the words, "unknown number." I answered. "Shipman, this is Rachel from the mortgage department at Western Union Bank. I'm calling to verify some recent activity on your account." I bolted upright, back aching from the awkward position I'd slept in. "What kind of activity?" "We received a request to update your contact information and to add 2 co-owners to your mortgage." I gripped the phone tighter. "I didn't send any request. I'm the sole owner. No one else has any right to change anything." We thought the same. The request didn't come through our secure portal and had inconsistencies. "As of now, our records still list you as the sole legal owner. I've locked the account to keep it secure." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Do you have the names they used?" A short pause. Then Rachel said, "Gordon and Linda Shipman." Felt like a weight dropped onto my chest. I wasn't surprised, and that was the scariest part. I just closed my eyes and said, "Thanks for calling." I sat still for a few minutes after the call ended. The air inside the car felt heavy. My thoughts spun in circles. Every small detail I'd brushed off, every moment of discomfort I'd ignored because they're family. Cassidy had asked for my social security number 3 years ago, said it was to help with some tax forms. I was juggling 2 jobs at the time, exhausted. She promised she'd just check something and delete it right after. I believed her. My mom, Linda, once handed me a thick stack of papers after my grandmother passed away. She said it was just some leftover accounting and needed my signature to help manage the distribution. I didn't read it carefully. I just looked at her eyes. Those same eyes that once sang me to sleep, that once looked proud when I got accepted into nursing school. So I signed. I used to think that was love. That it meant care. Now every one of those moments reappeared like links in a chain. A quiet plan carefully assembled. Me. I was the overly responsible daughter, the obedient one, the one too busy, too trusting, too easy to manipulate. I started the engine. The tires pressed softly against the damp asphalt. I didn't have a real destination, but one name floated into my head. Ava. Ava was my college roommate, now a civil and estate attorney. We'd kept in touch, not constantly but consistently. She's the kind of person who'll call you back within 5 minutes if you text urgent at 3 a.m. I parked outside Ava's building just before 8 a.m. I didn't get out right away. I sat there watching my hands tremble on the steering wheel. Inside me was a kind of fury that hadn't found its shape yet, something paralyzed and coiled, waiting for a name. Ava texted before I even knocked, "You look like you just walked out of a crime scene." I walked up. She opened the door in a cotton robe holding a coffee mug. "Claire." I didn't speak. I held up my phone, opened a note and read every detail of the bank call, every jagged memory pieced together, and finally said, "I think they've been planning this for a long time." Ava sat down, set her mug on the wooden table. Her face changed. She wasn't my friend in that moment, she was the attorney. Focused. Taken. "Do you have all your house documents?" I scanned everything. Saved them to the cloud and my external drive. Good. What about security cameras? Yes. I changed the password 2 months ago. Every motion gets recorded. She nodded, already forming a strategy in her head. Claire, if what you're saying is true, then this isn't just a housing dispute. This could be financial manipulation, even fraud. I looked down at my hands. My nail polish had almost completely chipped off, like a reflection of how exposed and worn I felt inside. Ava's voice softened but stayed firm. We'll handle this. But from now on, you don't treat them as family. You treat them as a third party occupying property that doesn't belong to them. No emotion. No hesitation. I took a deep breath. Something inside me loosened. Maybe the last illusion I had about what family meant. Ava placed a hand on my shoulder. Claire. Starting this morning, you're not alone. I pulled into the street where my house stood. Just a few days ago, it was still the place I called home. The porch light was on, same as always, but that glow no longer welcomed me. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car, each footfall feeling foreign. Everything looked unchanged. The lavender pot I planted still sat on the front step, the welcome mat remained. But something was undeniably off. I inhaled deeply and rang the doorbell. The click of the lock came quickly, and then a completely unfamiliar face appeared. A young woman, maybe 25, her light brown hair tied up, wearing a gray hoodie and sweatpants. She didn't flinch. Didn't look surprised. Just squinted slightly and asked flatly, "You're Claire?" I nodded, pausing. "Yes. Linda said you weren't coming back. That you had issues," and walked away. I froze. Those words hit like needles, sharp and cold. "I'm the owner of this house," I said, though my voice sounded like it came from far away. She didn't move, just stood blocking the doorway. "I'm renting it from her. There's a lease. I don't know what's going on, but she told me you'd signed away your rights." I bit my lip. Everything snapped into focus. This wasn't just about changed locks or a bank alert. They'd crafted an entire story. And in that story, I was the unstable one who disappeared. "What's your name?" I asked. "Elise. I don't want any trouble. I just needed a place to live." I pulled out my phone, my hand still shaking. "I'm calling the police." Elise let out a sigh, not scared, just tired. "I understand. But I have documents. And if you don't have something that proves you're still the legal owner, they won't be able to do anything." She closed the door, not slamming it but firmly enough to end the conversation. I stood there for a few seconds before calling 911. The police arrived within 10 minutes. The responding officer, Matthews, was middle-aged, polite, and clearly had seen hundreds of situations like this. "I'm the homeowner," I said as soon as he stepped out of the patrol car. "I was manipulated by my family and forced out of the house I legally own. The person inside has no right to be here." "Do you have any documentation?" he asked. "I have digital copies. I can send them to you." I opened my phone and pulled up the scanned copy of my purchase agreement and the deed with my name on it. Matthews took the phone, examined the files carefully, then gave a slow nod. "These documents look legitimate. But by law, we can't forcibly remove someone from a residence unless there's an eviction order or clear evidence of unlawful entry. You'll have to go through the court system. Even if the person was placed there by my own parents?" "Even then," he said slowly, his expression not without empathy. "My advice: contact your attorney, file the proper paperwork. You might also consider a restraining order." I thanked him, then watched as the police car pulled away into the fading daylight. Elise never reopened the door, but I knew she was standing behind the curtain, watching. I walked around to the back of the house. Everything looked the same at first glance, but through the smallest details I realized none of it truly belonged to me anymore. The photo of me and Ava on graduation day no longer hung on the kitchen wall. In its place was an abstract oil painting I'd never seen. The sofa cushions had been replaced, the cream color now a muted gray. On the back porch, the peony plant my grandmother gave me years ago, a soft pink one she'd nurtured herself, was gone. I leaned against the wall, my chest heavy. My thoughts returned to my grandmother. The only one in my family who ever called me the girl with the iron heart. She used to remind me often that I had to protect my worth with my own two hands, never bow to manipulation. She passed away 5 years ago. Suddenly, at a time when things between me and the rest of the family had already begun to drift. I never knew the details of her will. My mother had told me there wasn't much, mostly just sentimental things. I believed her. But now a new and chilling thought struck me. What if that was when this whole scheme had actually begun? I pulled out my phone and texted Ava. Elise is a tenant. Has a lease. Police can't act without a warrant. I need to meet with you ASAP. Her reply came almost instantly. Tonight. My place. Bring copies of everything. We start by investigating your grandmother's will. I stood up straight and looked at the house once more. No more tears. No more hesitation. Only resolve. If they had rewritten the story where I was the mentally unstable one, I was going to rewrite it back. Line by line, word by word, with proof. And this time no one would get to deny who I was or what rightfully belonged to me. I arrived at Ava's apartment just as twilight settled in. The city lights were already flickering on, but inside me it felt like sinking into a deep, dark place, where nothing familiar could be trusted anymore. Ava opened the door still in her office clothes, her hair pulled back neatly, holding a glass of red wine she hadn't touched. Come in, she said, no questions asked. Did you bring your laptop? I nodded, set my backpack on the chair. Ava locked the door behind me, drew the curtains, then pointed to the dining table where she had already laid out an external hard drive, a laptop, and a notebook opened to a blank page. Tonight, she said quietly, her eyes steely, we don't talk about emotions. Tonight we investigate. We trace everything. I powered on the laptop and plugged in the drive. The security system I'd installed at home 2 years ago wasn't the most advanced, but it had motion-triggered recording. I hadn't reviewed any of it since setup, because I'd never thought I'd need to. Ava sat beside me, typing quickly as she filtered footage by date and time. Let's start 3 weeks back. That's when you texted me saying you were heading to the DC conference. We'll start from there. Clips began to load. The first one was from around 8 in the morning. The front door opened with a code. Not me. A familiar beige coat shimmered in the light. My mother. Linda. I froze. She walked in without pause as if she owned the place. Took off her shoes. Glanced around. Went into the kitchen. Ava jotted notes quickly. You were in Washington. No permission given. This is clear. I clicked on the next clip. 2 days later. My father. He walked in with a folder, set it down on my desk, then sat in my leather chair. Leaned back. Crossed his arms. Another clip showed him attempting to access my personal computer. It didn't unlock due to the password. He stared at the monitor for a long while, like calculating his next move. Ava whispered, "That's not a visit. That's occupation." Kept going. The following week, Cassidy entered with Linda. They brought in picture frames, decor boxes, even table linens. Cassidy walked up to the hallway wall, removed a photo of me with my friends from last year, and replaced it with one of herself in a wedding dress. I went numb. Ava gently squeezed my shoulder. There's more, she said. I opened the audio recordings. I'd set up an automatic recording feature to trigger when voices were detected on the smart speakers, mostly as a precaution for break-ins. I never imagined I'd hear my own family betraying me. I played a file 40 seconds long from the morning I left for the conference. Cassidy's voice rang out, clear and unguarded. As soon as she's gone, it's ours. Mom said it. This is what Grandma wanted. Linda's voice followed, soft as a breeze. As long as Claire doesn't fight it, no one's going to look too hard. This house should have been yours a long time ago. I paused the audio. My chest constricted. Not from the theft, but from the utter lack of hesitation in their tone. No guilt. No remorse. Just strategy. Ava said nothing. She opened a folder on her computer, titled it Premeditated Occupation, and began saving each clip, time-stamped, transcribed. This is enough for court, she said, voice steady and low. It could even justify a criminal investigation if we can prove identity fraud or document falsification. I looked at the screen, my mother opening drawers where I stored personal files. Gordon attempting to access my safe. Cassidy replacing photos. This wasn't trespassing. This was replacement. I spoke softly, more to myself than to Ava. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to erase me from it like I was never there. Ava turned to me, her eyes sharp with understanding. And now you're going to make sure they never get to do it again. I nodded. No words were needed. We were no longer Claire, the woman pushed out of her home, and Ava, the best friend. Now we were two women, one betrayed to her core and the other determined that justice would not be forgotten. Ava pulled the laptop closer, scrolling to a PDF attachment from the local records office. Her eyes scanned the top of the page, then stopped at the section labeled Signature confirming transfer of ownership. Claire, she said, her voice even and low. Look at this signature. I leaned in. The name Claire E. Shipman stood out, dated exactly 3 weeks ago. That's not my signature. Ava already knew, but she needed me to say it out loud. She zoomed in. I compared this to your original home purchase documents, the mortgage contract, and your tax filings. They all match. But this one. She pointed to the thinner strokes, lacking pressure, missing the usual rightward slant. Whoever signed this tried to imitate you but didn't have the muscle memory of your dominant hand. I leaned back in the chair. Everything was sliding beyond what I thought I could endure. Can we sue? Ava nodded. Absolutely. This is forged legal documentation. And if we find they used your name for credit lines or to seize assets, this doesn't just stop at civil court. It becomes criminal. I stared at the blank corner of the wall, the place where my photos once hung in that house. So where do we start? Ava turned the screen toward me. Check your credit report. If they dared fake a signature, there's no reason they wouldn't take it further. I opened a browser and logged into the credit report portal. I'd never had reason to doubt my identity, never thought I'd need to monitor it regularly. But when the results came up, my heart sank. 2 new accounts had been opened under my name, one with a regional bank, another with a home furnishings chain. I scrolled to the application details. Both listed my parents' old address as the mailing address. This can't be real. Ava didn't respond. She just motioned for me to screenshot the page and save it as a PDF. She opened a new case summary on her laptop and pasted the screenshot under a section labeled Suspicious Financial Transactions under Personal Identity. I continued digging through old emails. Then I remembered a message from my mother over 2 years ago. Send me the scanned W-2 just to be sure. Your dad says if there's a mistake it could mess up filing. Give it to a friend of ours to check, sweetheart. I had sent it. I'd sent my entire tax file that year along with my social security number. As I thought they were helping. Ava glanced at me. They've been planning this for a long time. And you handed them the keys. I didn't cry. Betrayal from strangers might make you angry. But when it comes from your own blood, it leaves a wound so deep there are no tears left. Ava pulled a small whiteboard from the shelf and began sketching out a timeline with a dry erase marker. March. Claire goes on business trip. April. First camera footage of Gordon entering house. May. Credit applications appear, signature forgery verified. June. Linda signs lease agreement with Elise. July. Claire is told to leave. I stared at each line like a blueprint for a premeditated attack. This wasn't a moment of anger. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a system. Ava nodded. And you'll need a system to fight back. She opened another tab, the public property record portal. There's one more thing I need to check. Your grandmother's will. I froze. My mom told me she didn't leave anything. Just emotional stuff. Ava pressed her lips together. Let's see who she left her emotions to. It only took 10 minutes to locate the estate file from 5 years ago. Ava entered the property ID and my grandmother's name, Eleanor Shipman. One name appeared in the beneficiary field, Claire Evelyn Shipman, the sole legal heir to the property at 1289 West Maple Street. My house. I almost forgot to breathe. They knew. I whispered. They knew she left the house to me. But since the deed wasn't transferred then, they waited until I saved enough, until I took the mortgage under my name, and then they made their move. Ava nodded slowly. They let you pay to buy the house you already inherited. Then planned to steal it again by erasing you. I looked down. It didn't feel like theft anymore. It felt like full-blown exploitation. Ava spoke softly. From now on, Claire, we don't call them family anymore. We call them the defendants. I didn't argue. I just lifted my head, met her blade-sharp gaze and said, start preparing the case. I'm taking everything back. Every piece, every document, Every right they thought I wouldn't notice. Ava nodded once, no smile. In her eyes I saw a real ally. Not a sympathetic friend. Not a curious observer. But the one person truly on my side, with logic, with law, and with no room for mercy. We began that morning with 3 thick envelopes, each labeled and numbered clearly: digital evidence, legal documents, suspicious financial transactions. Ava wore a crisp white blouse and a charcoal blazer, her face calm and focused, like she'd been ready for this war a long time. I sat across from her, gripping the binder printed the night before. Emails, audio clips of Cassidy, camera footage capturing every moment they entered my home like it was theirs. Ava said, "We file an emergency restraining order first. We need a clear legal boundary before any civil proceedings can begin." We arrived at the county courthouse early. At the reception desk, Ava showed our documents and was directed to the second floor, where emergency filings involving property disputes and potential identity violations were handled. I signed each form, my palms sweating despite the room's icy temperature. About an hour later, a judge approved the temporary order. He looked at me and asked, "Do you believe there's ongoing risk of further harm?" I answered, "They didn't just take my home. They're trying to take my name." We left with a copy of the restraining order and detailed instructions on how to serve notice to the defendants. Back at Ava's office, she began drafting 2 additional documents: a formal letter demanding that the unauthorized occupant vacate my house within 3 days, and a civil notice initiating a property claim under state law. She wrote every clause meticulously, citing federal statutes and case precedents. I watched the text scroll across her screen like a hammer driving into the foundation my family had built. One made of lies. "What about the FBI?" I asked. Ava nodded and opened another browser tab. "We'll file a report through the Internet Crime Complaint Center. Identity theft, document forgery, asset manipulation, all fall under federal jurisdiction." She filled in each field: my name, the incident details, a summary of the events, then attached the encrypted file containing all our documents. When she hit submit, the click of the mouse sounded like a period at the end of the life I once believed was mine. We didn't stop there. Ava sent a copy of the case file to the state's Financial Investigation Office, including the extracted credit report showing 2 accounts opened under my name using my parents' address. I signed an affidavit myself, confirming I had never authorized any of those transactions. That evening, as we were organizing the files in Ava's apartment, my phone buzzed. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. "Hello." A woman's voice came through, shaky and uncertain. "Claire. This is she." "Who's speaking?" "It's Elise, the tenant." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you need?" I'll be leaving. First thing tomorrow morning. I got a letter from your lawyer. I didn't know what was going on." She paused, then spoke quickly, almost in tears. "They told me you had given up the house, that you had mental health issues and you'd signed it over. I didn't want to be part of any of this. I needed a place to stay and they made it seem like it was theirs." I said nothing. Not with anger. Not with coldness. Just nothing left to say. "Elise," I said, "you were pulled into something unfair. But fairness starts with leaving." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the city lights, feeling like I was passing through a storm no one had forecast. Early the next morning, I got a message. A photo of a handwritten letter on my dining room table and a single line: "She left this before she left." Ava arrived before I did. We opened the door using a temporary key issued with the court's enforcement order. On the table, just like in the message, was a folded piece of white paper, handwriting slanted across the page. I was misled. I thought this was inherited. "They said you weren't coming back. I'm sorry. Elise." I folded the note and added it to our evidence folder. Not because it had legal weight, but because it confirmed something I needed to remember. Sweet enough lies can make strangers take your place in your own life. Ava gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "No one's in there now. The house is empty. But more importantly, you're no longer silent." I stepped into the living room, looked around at what had been rearranged, scrubbed, altered. But this time I didn't feel loss. I felt solid, standing on the floor of truth, where every lie would soon be dismantled by law and my own voice. The sky was low and gray that day, as if even the clouds were holding their breath with me. I arrived at the courthouse with Ava holding a thick folder of evidence. Her face was serious, no trace of a smile. She understood this wasn't just a hearing. This was the first time I'd face my entire family, not at a dinner table or in the living room, but in a place where the law would speak last. We entered the courtroom right on time. Across the aisle, Gordon sat upright in a worn gray suit, eyes fixed on the floor. Linda sat beside him wearing a beige dress, her face frozen. Cassidy sat with her legs crossed, holding her phone though she didn't dare scroll. Each of them had their own attorney. But I knew, in this room, they were no longer my father, mother, or sister. They were the defendants. The judge, a woman in her 50s, spoke clearly, not rushed but not gentle either. She began by confirming identities and summarizing the key points of the case. Then she allowed Gordon to speak first. He stood, bowed slightly. His voice was low with a hint of a tremble. "Your Honor, I don't deny that modifications were made to the home. But I didn't do it for personal gain. I was trying to protect family assets. My daughter, Claire, has shown instability, withdrawn from contact, and made impulsive decisions. We feared she might lose the home that belonged to our family for generations." I didn't react. I didn't even blink when he said, "protecting family assets," as if everything I had worked for was just a byproduct of a name they had decided belonged to the collective. Cassidy stood next. She wore a white blouse, hair in a neat bun, trying hard to appear calm and mature. "Claire is independent, yes," she began, "but she's also prone to isolating. She left home for years with no contact. When she came back, we noticed changes: sleep disturbances, emotional instability. We were concerned she might not be capable of managing such a large property." Ava tilted her head and smiled faintly but said nothing. Then it was my turn. I stood, took a deep breath, and walked to the witness stand. "My name is Claire Evelyn Shipman. I am the legal purchaser of the home at 1289 West Maple Street. I've worked full-time for the Department of Public Health for over a decade, with no history of mental illness and no unexplained absences from work. I pulled from my folder copies of the mortgage, the purchase agreement, and the payment summary from the bank, all bearing my name. I placed each one carefully on the evidence table. The home security system was installed last June. Footage from the past 3 months shows my parents and sister entering my home while I was away. They brought personal belongings, removed my photos, and displaced my items without permission. I pressed a button on the display device. The screen lit up with footage of Linda removing my photo from the wall, Gordon sitting at my desk, Cassidy replacing the curtains. The courtroom went quiet. I let each clip play through without comment. Next, I played the audio recording. Cassidy's voice rang out clearly. "As soon as she's gone, everything will be mine. Mom said this is what Grandma wanted." The room held its breath. I glanced across the aisle. Linda turned away, Cassidy's face flushed red. "I'm not unstable. I was betrayed. And they didn't plan this because I was weak. They planned it because they knew I trusted them." My voice wasn't loud, but every word landed like a stone into still water. The judge looked at me, then turned to the defense attorneys. "Do any of you wish to respond before I give my ruling?" Gordon stood, but his attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, silently urging him to sit. No one else spoke. The judge adjusted her glasses, looking directly at me. After reviewing the evidence, testimony, and legal documentation, the court affirms that Claire Evelyn Shipman is the sole legal owner of the aforementioned property. The actions of the defendants indicate potential document forgery, identity misuse, and unlawful possession. The court approves a criminal investigation. She paused briefly. An eviction order for Gordon Shipman, Linda Shipman, and Cassidy Shipman is effective immediately. Any further attempts at contact, harassment, or occupation will be treated as legal violations. I didn't breathe. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there, in the perfect silence of that courtroom, listening to the judge's voice ring out like a bell after the longest night. Outside the courtroom, Ava turned to me. "Claire, there's nowhere left for them to hide." I nodded. But not in agreement. I nodded to mark the moment in memory. Not because I had won, but because the truth had finally been spoken, backed by evidence, declared aloud without the need to scream. I unlocked the front door using the new key, officially validated by the court. The locksmith had replaced the locks earlier that morning, right after the eviction order took effect. As the bolt clicked and I stepped inside, a familiar scent drifted through the air, my mother's perfume, faint but lingering like a memory that hadn't yet faded. The house was silent, empty of voices and bodies. But every detail in this space whispered to me that I had once been erased from my own life. I walked slowly through the living room. On the table, the old family photos had been swapped out, replaced by Cassidy's wedding portraits, and snapshots of my parents at some party I didn't recognize. I took each frame down, calmly without anger or hesitation, and placed them in a cardboard box, labeling it simply, "No longer belongs here." I called a security company to replace the entire system. Door code, motion sensors, cameras, even the remote thermostat. Everything reinstalled, personally configured by me. The technician asked, "What would you like to name the system?" I answered, "Claritas," an old Latin word that means clarity. That night I cleaned every room. My bedroom still had the bedsheets Cassidy had put on. I stripped everything off, washed the old curtains I had once picked up at a weekend flea market. The kitchen still had the spice jars my mother had rearranged. I tossed them all, one by one. Not out of hate, but because I no longer needed anything set up for me. In the attic, while searching for an old Ethernet cable box to replace a broken connector, I found a small wooden chest, tucked behind holiday decorations. It wasn't locked but was covered in dust, like it had been forgotten, or hidden on purpose. I pulled it down, set it on the floor, and opened the lid. Inside was a stack of letters tied with twine. The envelopes were worn, but the handwriting was unmistakable, my grandmother's. Each one was dated and numbered in the corner. Some were from 1998, others from 2003. The last one read, "Claire, only open when you're ready." I held that letter, my heart pounding. As I opened it, a folded sheet of paper fell out. It wasn't a letter. It was a will. My eyes scanned the first few lines. Clean strokes, proper legal phrasing. The line read clearly, "I, Eleanor Shipman, being of sound mind and memory, do declare that the sole heir of the property located at 1289 West Maple Street shall be my granddaughter, Claire Evelyn Shipman. No other party shall be authorized to transfer, access, or represent her interests in this matter." I sat still for a long while. In my hands was the truth, the voice of the only woman in the family who ever called me my own. I didn't cry, but my hands shook as I picked up the accompanying letter. My grandmother had written, "If you're reading this, it means you've been pushed out of where you were meant to belong. Claire, they won't stop unless you stand up. Keep this, let it be your shield." The next morning I went to the courthouse with Ava, carrying the original will. We requested official verification from the registrar's office, cross-checking the signature against the 2014 archive. After inspecting both the ink and handwriting, the clerk confirmed, "No doubt. This is a valid will and has never been revoked." Ava said nothing. She simply nodded and added it to the ongoing estate fraud case she had opened last week. "This doesn't just strengthen your ownership," she said to me, her eyes gleaming with resolution. "It raises a new question. How long have they knowingly concealed this document, and how did they do it?" I exhaled slowly. I think Grandma hid it, not out of fear, but because she knew what they would try if they ever found it. That evening I returned home and placed her framed photo back on the mantel, exactly where it used to sit. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark, letting the silence speak for my return. I didn't reclaim this house for the bricks, the beams, or its market value. I reclaimed it because my name had once been stripped from every door frame, every wall, every line of paper. And now, piece by piece, it was coming back, not by memory but by truth. A week after filing my grandmother's will in court, Ava got a call from the district attorney's office. I was wiping down the kitchen counters when she stepped out from her office, holding a heavily annotated folder. "They've started," she said. "The Financial Crimes Unit is on it. They'll begin tracing all transactions in Gordon's accounts over the last 2 years. And that's just the beginning." That same day, I received an email from the credit insurance company. A report full of details I had never seen. Someone had opened a credit card 6 months ago under my name, linked to a rented P.O. box located exactly 10 miles from my parents' old house. The charges totaled over $7,200. Furniture, electronics, and most suspiciously, A 2-person vacation to Florida. The cardholder's name, Cassidy Shipman. I sat still for a long moment, then slowly exhaled and picked up the phone. I just found proof Cassidy used my identity to open a credit card, I told Ava. She even booked plane tickets. She left a trail that clear? Ava asked, equal parts surprised and slightly amused. It's all in the statement. Even the IP address that accessed the account is linked to my parents' home Wi-Fi. Ava didn't hesitate. Perfect. That's federal fraud evidence. I'll forward it to the prosecutors right away. 3 days later, an article began circulating on social media. First through a local legal blog, then picked up by larger outlets. The headline was quiet but hit like a hammer. Woman stripped of her home by her own parents. Wins with evidence and resolve. Below was a photo of me walking out of court with Ava, file folder still in hand. The article didn't sensationalize or twist anything. It told the truth. About the house, the hidden will, the forged signature, and the courtroom where I didn't scream. I simply presented my evidence with the calm of someone carrying justice. I didn't post the article on my own page. But I received dozens of messages from people I'd once worked with, former colleagues, even neighbors who barely knew me beyond a wave from their porch. You reminded me that silence doesn't mean weakness. Family doesn't mean you can't draw a line. Thank you for standing up. For all of us who've ever been written out of our own stories. That night, as I was getting ready to close my laptop for bed, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo. My bedroom. The bed neatly made. And drawn across the white sheets, a red X, marked in what looked like ink or paint. No message. No threat. No name. Just the image, a quiet warning. I stared at the photo for a full minute. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. The feeling was no longer fear. It wasn't even pain. I saved the photo to my evidence folder and titled it, Direct Threat, Post-Article Response. Then forwarded it to Ava. Her reply came in under a minute. Don't worry. I'll send it to cybersecurity and the federal investigators. They'll trace it. I set my phone down, walked into my real bedroom, the one where I hadn't rehung a single picture yet. I touched the fresh white bedsheet I had just changed the day before. Spotless. No red X. Just quiet. No one gets to shake me anymore by poisoning the space I call home. Because I've learned something. Fear only thrives in silence. And once you name what's happening, once you have evidence, an attorney, and the law behind you, even threats begin to shrink. The next day, I received a call from the lead investigator on the case. We've accessed Mr. Gordon Shipman's banking data. There are multiple cash withdrawals with no clear origin that match the dates the house locks were changed. Some of the transactions from his account were even used to pay utilities for the house, after it was already in your name. I went silent for a moment. You mean, he used his own money to pay bills in the house he was trying to steal? Exactly. And that's proof they weren't just squatting. They were intentionally constructing a false legal narrative. This is enough to escalate the case to the state level. I thanked him and hung up. Not because I felt relieved, but because I knew the dominoes had just started to fall. And no one could stop them now. That afternoon, I hung a dried eucalyptus garland across the kitchen window, the day before Thanksgiving. The scent of baked apple pie blended with the cinnamon simmering on the stove in a small pot, warming the space not by temperature but by a sense of belonging. The wooden dining table was dressed with a simple woven runner, a few sprigs of dried eucalyptus, low candles, and a bundle of wildflowers I picked hastily from the backyard. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, just enough to remind myself that this house finally belonged to those who valued peace. Ava arrived first, carrying roasted squash and a bottle of red wine I'd never heard of. I figured by now, you deserve only the best wine, she said with a wink. Right after Ava came the Winters, my neighbors down the block who had quietly witnessed nearly the entire ordeal from behind their fence. Winters brought his family stuffing recipe while Mrs. Winters had carefully wrapped cornbread in foil to keep warm. We're really glad to be back here for the right reasons, he said, shaking my hand with a warm look. Claire, we always believed you were telling the truth. It's just, sometimes people don't know when to speak up. I smiled. Not because of what he said, but because I no longer waited for anyone else to speak for me. The meal was simple, gentle. No hidden anger, no one walking on emotional eggshells. We laughed about the oven running too hot, about how Ava once almost blew up the gas stove in our college dorm. At one point, I looked around the table. Faces not bound by blood, not sharing a last name, but they had chosen to stay. Later, still in my apron and with flour dust in my hair, I washed the dishes and opened my laptop. I posted a short entry in the women's forum Ava once invited me to. I didn't write much and I didn't center myself too strongly. I simply shared that I had once been a victim of financial abuse within my own family, that I'd been pushed out of the very house I legally owned, and told I was too sensitive, imagining things. And then I found my truth, through evidence, through law, and by not being afraid anymore. Within 3 hours, the post had over 100 replies. I thought I was the only one this happened to. My mom used my name to take out loans. I don't even know where to start. Thank you for speaking up. You have no idea how much this means. I didn't respond to every comment. I just read them. And with every line, I felt a layer of invisible dust lift off the years I had carried silently. The feeling that maybe I'd overreacted, that my hurt wasn't valid. A few days later, while dusting off the old bookshelf in the living room, the one I almost threw out because Cassidy had filled it with paperwork that wasn't mine, I found a small card tucked behind a thick botany book. It was simple, cream-bordered, handwritten with care. Claire, we always believed you. Sorry it took us this long to say it. No name. But the handwriting was familiar. Probably Mrs. Kendra, the woman who lived across the hall, who once saw me through her window the night I was thrown out. She hadn't said anything then. Now she didn't need to. One card was enough. On New Year's Eve, I wore a gray turtleneck sweater and a light wool scarf Ava had knitted herself. I brought a mug of hot cocoa to the second-floor balcony. The city below was getting ready for the countdown. Tiny homes lit up with twinkle lights, balconies glowing with soft garlands. I heard children laughing in the distance, faint music drifting from someone's speaker. I curled up on the deck chair, legs tucked under me, staring at the small street where it all began. This house had once been a battleground. A place where my name had been erased from the story of my own life. But now no one could touch a single wall, a single memory, a single step I had taken through this space without my permission. I raised the mug, letting the warmth settle into my hands. Out there, the clock struck 12. Applause erupted, cheers rustled through the cold air. I tilted my head, looked down the street, and whispered, "They almost took my house. But they never took me." What do you think about my story? About how a home can be taken but your worth and identity cannot. Maybe you've been in a similar situation. Doubted when you spoke the truth, isolated when you stood your ground. If you've gone through that, or if you're in the middle of finding your way back, I'd love to hear your story. We don't need to share the same bloodline to understand what it's like to be betrayed by those we once trusted most. But we can share how we got through it, with resilience, with clarity, and sometimes just by saying out loud, I deserve to stay in my own story. If this story resonated with you, leave a few thoughts below. I read every message, and sometimes, one sentence of solidarity is all someone needs to feel a little less alone. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, about family, about choice and quiet courage, subscribe to the channel. I'll keep telling them. Because life doesn't end at a moment of betrayal. It begins again in how we rise from it.